Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Law Chat with John and Amy. I'm John Yulian.
And I'm Amy Poliafico. This week's question is, what are temporary orders in a divorce?
Temporary orders are a critical aspect to many divorce cases since it's typically the party's first orientation with the probate and family court. Temporary orders are brought about by one of the sides filing a motion for temporary orders and raising the issues they feel need to be addressed at the hearing and that are issues that can't wait until a final resolution on the case. So these typical issues are things like child custody. Who's going to have custody of the child or children? What's going to be the child support? What's going to be the parenting time by the parent who's not the primary custodial parent? You can also address alimony at a temporary order hearing, health insurance. Those are all common areas to be addressed at temporary order hearings. One important thing to remember is whatever decision or outcome occurs at a temporary order hearing does not necessarily mean that that's going to be the final outcome in a case. So if an order or an agreement says someone's going to pay $300 a week in child support, that's not binding on what will be the outcome in the case. It just means that's what's going to be in existence until later on when there's either additional temporary orders or a resolution reached in the case.
And judges won't address every issue at a temporary order hearing. Items such as dividing assets or selling real estate generally get deferred to the end of the case. And that's because what the judge is doing is setting up the status quo of how you're going to operate while you're in the divorce until you reach a final agreement or go to trial. And just to give you an idea of what to expect, either prior to the day of your hearing or at least at the day of your hearing, you, hopefully through your attorney and the other side through their attorney, are going to try and negotiate to see if you can reach an agreement on any of these things. A typical thing to reach an agreement on is your health insurance. Typically, one person maintains the health insurance for the family. That's an easy one to agree on. Yes, you're going to maintain the health insurance as we're going forward, or uninsured expenses. If it's just two parties and they have no kids, you're each going to be responsible for your portion of any uninsured medical expenses. And then if you can reach an agreement on certain issues, you'll enter into a stipulation, which essentially is just like a kind of a contract that gets written down. You'll both sign it, your attorneys will sign it, and gets presented to the judge for his or her approval. Any issues that you cannot resolve will get presented by your attorneys to the judge, and then the judge will be able to ask questions if they have any questions, and then based off the motions and objections that were filed, the financial statements that got filed at the hearing, and the arguments that the attorneys made, the judge will make a decision. Sometimes you'll know the decision that day, and other times it gets mailed out to you so you don't have it for a couple of weeks.
And temporary orders can be modified or changed under the appropriate circumstances. So sometimes there's temporary orders in place and someone needs to file a motion for additional temporary orders. So that can occur also. Just remember the temporary orders are only in effect until a future order comes out that changes the terms of, for example, parenting time or the child support or any issue, or you ultimately reach a final agreement in the case, or the judge ultimately makes a determination after a trial.
That seems like a good place to stop for today. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to chatting with you again next week. If you have a question or comment, feel free to email us at info@yulianlaw.com. Remember that Law Chats with John and Amy is intended as a general reference and considered general advertising, and listeners should check for changes to any applicable laws and consult with an attorney on any legal issue. The information provided does not constitute legal advice, and any thoughts or commentary by the podcasting lawyers is provided as a service to the community and does not constitute solicitation of legal advice. The lawyers in the law firm of Yulian & Associates PC make no warranties and disclaim all liabilities for damages resulting from its use. Nothing provided in the podcast should be considered a substitute for advice from counsel. No attorney-client relationship is formed by listening or participating in this podcast, and in the event that the podcast receives emails about the subject matter, no attorney-client relationship is created via the email communication.